It's really great to see all of you at our first 2023 Civic Influencers Town Hall. I'm Maxim Thorne, the Chief Executive Officer of Civic Influencers, and humbled to share with our stakeholders proof that our young voter movement worked and our plans to get to scale to safeguard our democracy in 2023 and 2024 is sound. You will hear again and again how simple our strategy is and how our data proves that we successfully target pro-democracy young voters at strategic campuses, and they consistently beat the margins for the folks that they want to get elected. Even as we celebrate the success of our young voter movement that blocked the fake red tsunami that right-wing media falsely promoted, we know that the threats against our democracy continue to escalate. These threats are laser focused on our voting rights for Americans, especially descendants of the enslaved like me, and for women for whom voting rights were not assured at our founding. The right to vote and ensuring the next generation of diverse Americans can exercise it is central to ensuring our humanity and our equality. The far right is very persistent and has not stopped its decades-long or even centuries-long fight against our voting rights, abortion rights, the environment, the New Deal, Medicare, Social Security, and marriage equality. We will learn, and you will learn today, about how we are helping young people to organize and be even more vigilant and persistent. Young people, like the rest of us, experienced the overt efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, culminating in the January 6th attack on our nation's capital. Since then, folks, of the 291 election deniers who run for office in 2022, an astounding 191 election deniers won and are now serving in office. We are educating young people about how this anti-democracy movement is working feverishly and successfully to pass state laws designed to restrict voting and to hand the power of election to state governments. One horrifying example is the voter suppression law that Governor DeWine of Ohio signed on January 6th, 2023, that targets young voters and people of color. It restricts voter IDs to passports, Ohio driver's licenses, military ID, and government IDs. You don't need our data science department to tell you that young people, especially at community colleges, trade schools, technical and vocational schools, often do not possess passports, Ohio driver's licenses, military IDs, and government IDs. This law is designed to surgically remove young people from voting and our democracy. Civic Influencers joined a lawsuit against Ohio, and we are represented by the Mark Elias Law Group. We need your help more than ever in Ohio and many critical states to protect young people's access to the ballot. I want to thank you, our donors, and especially Celeste, and the Land Foundation, who support our lawsuit in Ohio, and ask all of you to join in and sustain our boots on the ground and boots on campuses right now. This is no off year. In today's town hall, we will show you how young people made the difference in the 2022 midterms and how they will do it again in 2023 and 2024. I know it's a lot of data, but the data is simple. We strategically target enough pro-democracy young voters who can make a difference in these elections and can do it again and again as they grow their civic power. We will show you how our campus strategy works and how we need your help urgently to sustain our momentum and to block the escalating efforts to suppress young voters. That includes bad laws, active disinformation and misinformation, and even donor malaise. that could cause the civic engagement infrastructure to atrophy in certain states. You will also hear today from our co-chief of organizing, Audrey Ferguson. Audrey's background is in labor organizing in Colorado, Texas, and Virginia. You will also hear from J.C. Brown, one of our statewide organizers at large, who focused on Pennsylvania. They will highlight how effective our work is in building and broadening a diverse young voter movement on campuses, especially those often ignored community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools. I don't know if you know this, but federal records show that in 2023, 40% of US undergraduate students now attend community colleges. That's about 5.5 million students. Almost 16% of high school graduates are enrolled in trade and technical schools. That's about 2.7 million students at the country's 7,271 trade and technical schools. That's an increase of 1.5% from last year, 2022. These undervalued groups made a difference in tight races in 2022, and with your help, will make a difference again in 2023 and 2024. Our targeted pro-democracy young people are the game changer in our trifecta strategy for young people to increase their civic power in House elections, Senate elections, and in the presidency. Our data clearly identifies the young people who are most likely to be pro-democracy voters. While most youth get out the voter organization focus broadly on better resourced four-year college campuses, we intentionally also focus, it's heavier lifting, but on traditionally marginalized young people at community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools, as well as historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, and tribal campuses. We can report to you the estimated costs for each in-personal relational engagement with a young, hard-to-reach, pro-democracy voter was only $1.67. Our work is amazingly cost-effective. JC, please share with our stakeholders what we do on our targeted campuses, especially at community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools, like in Pennsylvania. JC Brown.
Thank you, Maxim. Hi, y'all. I'm JC Brown. I'm an organizer at large at Civic Influencers. I live in the Pittsburgh area, and I've focused on building the youth voter movement in Pennsylvania. I'm originally from Mississippi and started this work back home, and I'm glad to continue it here in the Commonwealth. My work is a part of Civic Influencers' nationwide efforts to increase voter engagement among eligible voters aged 18 to 29. Each year, over 4 million 17-year-olds in this country turn 18 and become eligible to vote. Our mission is to get more and more of them to the polls because saving our democracy and equality is neither a sprint nor a marathon. It is an intergenerational relay. That is especially true for American women and people of color who are targets of white nationalists. So in Pennsylvania, we have a voting landscape of about 188 colleges and universities, enrolling over 680,000 students, including 52-year colleges with enrollment of around 200,000, 2 historically Black colleges and universities, 2 primarily Black institutions, and 2 Hispanic serving institutions. There are also 117 trade, technical, and vocational schools with an enrollment of about 70,000 students. To give you a little perspective, the aggregate enrollment of Civic Influencers Pennsylvania campuses is 247,966 students. John Fetterman's margin of victory was 190,125. We attack our work at all campuses on 2 levels. 1, we hire and train young people on campuses to encourage their peers to vote. And 2, we work with campus administrations to help make it easier for the students to vote. with the goal of overcoming the barriers being enacted by states to make it harder for them.
JC, can you share a little about how we help drive the demand for young people to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that differentiates us here at Civic Influencers is that our research department uncovers new ways that we help young people connect local issues they are passionate about to voting. This becomes a rallying cry for young people to actually go and vote. We help them plan and share their voting strategies, whether it's on reproductive rights, gun violence, the environment, ESG, student debt, racial justice, healthcare, and LGBTQIA+ equality. Our students care about lots of issues in their local communities.
Thanks, JC. And with everything that's happening right now, the horrible death of Tyree Nichols, the mass shootings in East Lansing, at Oxford and Michigan State University, the toxic train derailment too in Ohio. Young people are energized. We need to sustain that. I would also mention that we help guide young organizers on how to effectively frame issues that they care about, like government reform and policing reform. We've seen how young people reject binary frames and tribalism, and we are actively promoting reverse mentoring for older Americans to ensure, as JC said, our democracy relay is successful. And now I'd like to welcome Audrey, our co-chief of organizing. Civic Influencers, Audrey. Civic Influencers refers to our work as a young voter movement. Would you explain that, please?
Yeah, of course. And thank you, Maxim and JC. My name's Audrey Ferguson. I'm out in Austin, Texas. And I'm Civic Influencers co-chief of organizing, which means I oversee a lot of our granular campus organizing strategies. But in 2022 and going forward into 2023 and 24, we're really focused on building two different movements. First off, we're creating a grassroots pro-democracy movement among young people eligible to vote. And secondly, a treetops pro-democracy movement with campus administrations that'll promote voting and democracy. We proved that our voter movement achieves short and long-term wins, and ultimately we're focused on a long-term strengthening of our democracy by re-energizing it with coming of voting age citizens. While most youth civic organizations focus broadly on the wealthier four-year college campuses, what differentiates us is that we intentionally engage with traditionally marginalized young people. Folks who are attending community colleges, trade schools, technical and vocational schools, historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, and tribal campuses. These young people deserve to have their voices heard and to be able to vote, and scaling this work is essential. So I wanted to thank Pam and Helen for their interest in this often neglected space. And when we have margins of victories of only 546 and 565 votes in congressional districts from Colorado to California, your donations that support us scaling our work to more campuses will see a significant return on investment. In our grassroots movement, we hire young people on these campuses and train them to engage their peers. These peer-to-peer engagements are much more effective in mobilizing young people to register and to vote than the top-down communications of the typical youth civic engagement organization. Like, for example, in Georgia, we used peer-to-peer organizing on our campuses, which had an aggregate enrollment of about 250,000 students. And to put this in context, the margin of victory for Raphael Warnock was just only a hair over 37,000 votes. For our treetops movement, we created and enhanced a 13-point scorecard for campus administrators, and we'll help them focus on the types of actions that can take to make voting more easy for their students, such as establishing a polling place on campus, providing transportation to the polls, creating student ID that's voter ID compliant, giving students time off on election day, and institutionalizing voter registration on campus. All of which results in an estimated cost of only $1.67 per in-person engagement with a targeted young, hard-to-reach pro-democracy voter.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Audrey, for the great work that you do with us. You know, Audrey's labor organizing background has been so crucial to our success. JC, please tell us more specifically about races where the young voter movement made a difference.
Yeah, so we're laser focused on what we call tipping point campuses in districts and states where the margin of victory is very tight and where getting students to vote can make the difference in the outcome of the race. In 2022, our mobilized young voter movement made the difference and stopped the red tsunami in the races for the Pennsylvania and Nevada Senate, Arizona and Wisconsin governor, and House races including Michigan Congressional District 7, North Carolina Congressional District 1, Virginia Congressional District 7, and Pennsylvania Congressional Districts 12 and 17. We know that we help thousands of young people show up to the polls to support the issues they care about. Again, reproductive rights, ending gun violence, ESG, environment, racial justice, student debt relief, and the list goes on and on. I was organizing students across Pennsylvania, specifically in Pennsylvania Congressional Districts 12 and 17. As most of you know, the entire country recently went through redistricting processes based on the new census. We were extremely worried about the reality of systemic voter suppression through the redrawn maps. Pennsylvania Congressional District 17 was now an open seat that many believed would flip red, and PA Congressional District 12 was virtually entirely new and also an open seat. However, young people helped secure pro-democracy wins in both districts.
JC, I want to share with our stakeholders the redistricted map of Pennsylvania 12, because it's powerful when you see what it meant for everyone doing this kind of work and how nimble we had to be to get young people on those new campuses or those reduced campuses as there may be. So can you see the redistricting map and talk about it?
Yeah, thank you for sharing the maps. So we worked on campuses in these districts as well as across the state. And like you said, we were very nimble in identifying the campuses that were now in the newly drawn districts. Young voters in Pennsylvania Congressional District 12 elected Summer Lee, the first Black woman from Pennsylvania to serve in Congress. Young voters also helped elect Pennsylvania's first Black Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis. And in District 17, they elected Christopher DeLuzio in the redrawn and more rural Pennsylvania Congressional District 17. And finally, they delivered a victory to John Fetterman that expanded his party's hold on the US Senate. It was really amazing. On election day, I was at one of the largest universities in the country, Pennsylvania State University, that has a population of around 89,000 students. Young people at Penn State had the opportunity to make a difference in statewide, and if they did, they will be the deciding factor in who has control of the Senate. If you'll recall, the day after the midterm at our town hall, Maxim shared this diagram that I want to share with you all again. And bear with me, I'm about to throw a lot of numbers at you, but just stay with me. We're sharing it again so that you can see young people made up the entire margin of victory in Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona. If you look at Pennsylvania, the aggregate enrollment of Civic Influencers Pennsylvania campuses was 247,966 students. John Fetterman's margin of victory was 190,125, and net youth votes were 119,521. In Georgia, our campuses had an aggregate enrollment of 215,692. The margin of victory for Raphael Warnock was just 37,675. But the net youth votes for Senator Warnock were 115,510. That means that young people carried him and many others to victory. And if we move on to Arizona, our campuses had an aggregate enrollment of 187,144. Katie Hobbs' margin of victory was only 24,772. And as you can see on the screen, the net youth votes were 60,323. Again, I know that those are a lot of numbers, but they are very exciting once you digest the amount of power that young people carried in the 2022 midterm elections. And continuing on in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Mastro won by 6,582, and her net youth vote was 24,856. So despite this false sentiment that young people would not make a difference in the 2022 midterm elections, or that there would be a guaranteed red tsunami across the country, you can see that young people in many states, and particularly Pennsylvania, showed up at the polls and overwhelmingly voted for pro-democracy candidates and on those issues that they care about. With your help, we have the opportunity to scale our work on campuses, secure our youth voting movement infrastructure on community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools, expand on the youth vote, and engage even more young voters across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. On the other hand, in states and districts where we did not engage, weak youth turnout resulted in different, and some would say sad results, like in New York and California. Our Pennsylvania youth vote history and momentum is powerful. In 2014, voters under 30 were 6.6% of total turnout. In 2018, that went up to 9.8%. In 2022, they accounted for 11.1%. That huge turnout of young voters really made a difference.
They certainly did. Thank you, JC. And thank you for bearing with this data. This is such exciting proof that what we do made a difference, changed history, and we'll do that again this year and in 2024, but only if you help invest in our work. So what does that mean for our strategy in 2023 and 2024? It is very important that we maintain and expand the youth civic engagement infrastructure on the ground this year and continue to build towards 2024. We saw some of that infrastructure atrophy since the 2020 presidential election, especially in non-swing states, and the absence of youth votes caused some pro-democracy candidates to lose in those states. For example, in New York, California, and of course, Colorado. Here are some critical races in 2023 that we may be engaged in. You will notice highlighted in green are those races that are taking place in states that tend to be battleground states or are certain to be battleground states in 2024. We are very cognizant that we are building towards the 2024 presidential elections, and our efforts is to shift power to young voters. We highlight in green what we know will be battleground states. And here are the 2024 Senate races and more. You will see how critical it is for us to build month after month in 2023 to ensure that we have a robust and successful infrastructure. We've hired our civic influencers and trained them. We've worked with the treetops administrators on these campuses so that we are going to get a robust turnout of young people in the Senate races, in the presidential race, and even in the governor race in North Carolina next year. And very important to our trifecta strategy to grow youth civic power would be the House races of 2024. So here they are. Again, we've highlighted the House races that are in the battleground states. We identified 34 targeted House districts with less than 1% margin wins, or that toss up and lean pro-democracy. 13 of these House races are in targeted states, important for the presidential and Senate races. Let me also note, 14 of these races won with margins under 5,000 votes. Under 5,000, that's smaller than a campus. That's smaller than a football game at any of these, smaller than a marching band. 19 are toss-up races. 15 lean pro-democracy, and 6 are in New York districts. Here's what I'm asking of you. Please invest in our trifecta strategy to grow and accelerate young people's voting power. We see this as young people moving from potential to kinetic voting power. As you heard JC describe, election after election, young people make up more of the voting public. Young people will have the power to decide who controls the House, the Senate, and the presidency more and more in coming years. Civic influencers will achieve this through our trifecta strategy, mobilizing these tight margins, identifying the pro-democracy tipping point campuses, and driving youth voter turnout by helping young people connect the issues they care about to voting in order to achieve pro-democracy wins for the presidency, the House, and the Senate. And that happens today, with the horrible death of Tyree Nichols, with the toxic train crashes in Ohio. All these things keep young people engaged. We believe that the young voter movement will make a significant impact. For example, we are eager to organize Colorado District 3, where Lauren Boebert won by 546 votes. California District 13, where John Duarte won by 565 votes. Is that even a dorm? And New Mexico, Colorado 2, where Gabriel Vasquez won by only 1,310 votes. Young voters proved they can win and grow their civic power. Many media pundits were hoodwinked by right-wing media about the red tsunami and that young people wouldn't vote. That hurt what could and should have been an even more powerful growth and impact of our young voter movement. I want to remind people, here is what Jim Garrity of the National Review wrote on November 7th, 2022. This is the day before the midterm elections. For the past week or so, my back-of-the-envelope math envisioned a GOP House majority somewhere between 229 and 241, and I'm sticking to that. Give the Republicans the 212 seats the Cook Political Report with 2/3 of the 35 races in the toss-up category, and you end up with 235 Republicans and 200 Democrats. So put those down as my final prediction numbers. We know the actual results were only 222 Republicans and 213 Democrats, a difference of only 9 seats, which is exactly the difference that Nancy Pelosi had when she was Speaker of the House. Not Garrity's prediction of a red tsunami that would have resulted in a 35-seat margin. When we reflect on the seats that flipped, as well as the seats that didn't in civic influencers targeted districts and states, we know our strategy was successful. We're going to be sending you all our annual report and our one-pager to digest, because I know these numbers are heavy, but you get a chance to really digest them and how powerful what we're doing is. If there is any regret on my part or our organization or our board's part, it is that we did not have the resources to expand and deepen our work that would have made a difference for even more pro-democracy candidates and maybe change outcomes, for example, in Colorado District 3 and elsewhere. I'm urgently asking you for your help this year and next. We need your financial support to scale our work, helping at least 50 more community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools, and to train and deploy at least 1,000 civic influencers boots on campuses. We need to work with all of these administrators to get them on board with our 13-point scorecard, that helps them know what they need to do to increase their young people's voting engagement. We need to sustain our youth voter movement and infrastructure, especially in swing states and districts, where we are seeing high levels of voter suppression and an explosion of right-wing mis- and disinformation. Keep in mind what you're seeing on your screen. The big voting demographic shift. By 2024, millennials and Gen Z will make up about 45% of eligible voters. And it is anticipated that baby boomers and older generations will continue to shrink to about 35% of eligible voters. What does that mean? In the context of Every year, more than 4 million 17-year-olds will turn 18 and be newly eligible to vote. It is our collective responsibility and privilege to help these young people learn how to become active participants in our democratic process. I will close by paraphrasing the great James Baldwin. Our fight for young people to exercise the right to vote is a fight against oppression and those who would deny our very humanity and right to exist. We can only win this relay, this intergenerational relay for democracy, with your help. Thank you. Elise.
You've heard about our data-driven strategy to grow youth civic power in this year's state and local races and grow our movement for 2024's presidential and federal elections. In order to accomplish these things, we need early funding, sustained from now through the end of 2024. Please consider funding some of our 1,000 civic influencers that we'll have in that time. These are our boots on campuses. Each one receives a stipend of $2,500. You can also adopt a trade school or community college for $10,000. Excitingly, we now have the ability to run peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns, so you can recruit your friends and family to help you raise that goal. Another option is adopting a historically Black college and or university or Hispanic serving institution by giving or raising $15,000. Or give or raise $25,000 to support young people organizing around the issues that matter to them and will drive their peers to the polls. $25,000 for racial justice to address the issues raised by Tyree Nichols' murder. $25,000 to defend the environment as Ohio struggles with their second train derailment in the last month. $25,000 for ESG. $25,000 urgently needed to address gun violence. Let's not forget the mass shootings at Oxford High School and Michigan State. $25,000 for student debt relief as the Supreme Court considers overturning the president's plan. Or $25,000 for LGBTQIA+ equality as Florida implements the Don't Say Gay bill. Additionally, we welcome your introductions to potential partners, supporters, or foundations. Please send introductions to myself, Elise, that's ELISE, at civicinfluencers.org. All of this information will be available in the materials that we share with you after today's town hall.
Thanks, Elise. Beryl, I see you have a question for me. And this is part of, let's read your question. Do you have an explanation for Mandela Barnes's loss when the Democratic governor of Wisconsin won? Do you think racism played a part in Barnes's loss? Yes. It is our history. It is our history. It doesn't mean that he will not win again the next time. I think Georgia is a testament to how America can change. I also think, Beryl, not to be discounted, is how many people were hoodwinked by the notion that there's going to be a red tsunami. I also believe that while racism had an impact, had we had resources more than we did, and had folks believed that it was possible that he would win, he would have won. I really believe that. People I know in our organization, people lost heart. Our donor community lost heart for months during last year, and then got reinvigorated in October, 1 month before the election. And you will see, if you go back, there was little faith, and I heard this from some people, that he would win. And he came so close, as did other people. I believe that we are on a path to be able to have young people select in a much less racist or race-informed way than other generations have done. We see this non-binary thinking of young people. We see an acceptance of diversity we've never seen in any other generation when we talk about Gen Z and millennials. So if we can actually grow the infrastructure and increase civic power for young people, successfully as we've done, and also the game changer are young people who are at community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools. That's game changers. And we know that a lot of them, majority of them, significantly, are pro-democracy voters that will see more pro-democracy wins for the Senate and for the House and the presidency, and the equivalent in state races for the governor, for state assemblies and state senates. I see, Leslie, you have a question. How many civic influencers worked in the 2022 elections? Love that question. It allows you to then answer why we need early money and we are not a group that parachutes in September of an election year and hope to be successful with mobilizing young people in November. Relational organizing, especially with hard to reach pro-democracy young people at a trade school, vocational school, technical school, community college, starts the year before. And there are elections. I want people to understand, we see all of this as a movement. So getting involved in primary elections, getting your feet wet with mayoral elections, with state assembly, as in Virginia this year, Louisiana this year, is preparation for major midterm elections and presidential election. We had, over the course of this period, over 900. It's really important. I want to break down this frame that this movement work is a 3-month operation. It's only in the fall of whenever the presidential elections or the federal midterm elections are held. It isn't. If you believe that we need to empower young people to own our democracy and participate, it's a 2-year minimum commitment, starting now through the presidential elections of 2022. Vivian, if civic influencer had the financial resources, are there campuses in New York State that would make a difference in the House races in 2024? Yes, absolutely. We identified, folks, let me make this very clear, especially if you've been with us for the long haul. You will know that we charted about 55 very strong possibilities and 88 total of races that young people could make a difference in the midterms. We weren't able to get to even half of that number given our resources. We identified New York, Long Island, which is now like bright red for some bizarre reason, as places that young people can make a difference. They're SUNY campuses, they're community colleges, they're trade schools that could make a difference in Long Island and other parts, even upstate New York. Remember, upstate New York in 2020 had a race that was won by 119 votes. Our strategy and my appeal to you is that it's not just Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina. We know those are battleground states. But our trifecta strategy, that's why I pointed out to you our House, the majority of those tight margin races where young people can make a difference are not in the states I just mentioned. So we do want to build momentum for in the battleground states that we just, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, etc. But to have a trifecta impact, which young people need to have, we have to go to New York, California, Washington State. Look at that. I don't know if someone could put that back on the screen. And yes, if we had resources in 2022 that would have allowed us to organize in Colorado, in California, in Oregon, in New York, it would be a completely different pro-democracy picture today. And again, if we had the resources to handle just these 34, not 88, these 34 House races that go beyond the battleground states, I think the future of our democracy in the hands of young people looks really great. I see. Right. So I see a question specifically on Colorado. We mapped out Colorado Congressional District 3 since 2021. We didn't know it was going to be as tight that Lauren Boebert or whichever candidate would win by 546 votes. But we were pretty certain that our strategy of targeting, laser focused targeting at community colleges, there's a Pueblo Community College in Lauren Boebert's district. There were 30,000 students. We felt very strongly that our strategy would get pro-democracy young people out. But we could not. We did not raise the money to take on that district. She has the tightest margin in the 2022 midterms. I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. We don't want to have that happen again. Again, Colorado was not a battleground state. It's not a battleground state. But with those pickups for young people on the issues they care about, democracy, ending crazy mass shootings at Oxford and Michigan State, connecting those issues they care about will see a trifecta growth of power by young people. And I hope we've shared with you enough information to say where we were funded, we were incredibly successful. Where we wanted to be funded to be even more successful, and we weren't. You saw youth infrastructure, youth civic engagement infrastructure atrophy in New York and California and elsewhere. And we don't want that to happen again. How do I know that our targeting in 2023 is going to be effective? I am not a fortune teller, but I could say I think we've presented a lot of evidence that went against the grain of so many pundits and others who felt young people will not vote. The only issues that were going to be relevant to the midterms were gas prices and inflation. And we know from our data science department that young people were mobilized and motivated, and they weren't voting on gas prices and inflation. They were voting on the issues we've shared with you: reproductive rights, ending gun violence, saving the environment, racial justice, LGBTQ justice. That has not changed. And strategically targeting game changers, which are young pro-democracy voters at community colleges, trade schools, technical schools, and vocational schools, as well as other campuses like Penn State, where JC was on election day, makes a difference. Makes a difference. And yes, I am confident that we can build on the wins we had this year for young people. And I think a trifecta victory for young people's power is very achievable. I have a question on, okay. The funding for our civic influencers. I think it's really important, and this is something that Leslie asked earlier, to restate. We are in a global and national environment that is very stressful for young people. There are financial issues, there are mental health issues, there are stresses with gun violence, etc. We have determined here, and I hope you agree, that it's important to pay. It's important to pay our organizers on campuses. We welcome volunteers and welcome people who have the financial capacity to volunteer for this important work. But we cannot rely on that. And we cannot rely on that for the lowest income of our students, those found at community colleges, trade, technical, and vocational schools. And the reason we ask you to fund 2 years of work for our civic influencers is to keep them engaged and financially viable to keep up this work, and that there's merit in it. We also ask you to fund, as Elise said, mobilizing young people on the issues they care about, like reproductive rights, gun violence, climate change, LGBTQ justice, and so forth. Because it's the issues that they care about that drives turnout. It is not just lowering barriers. So when Audrey talks about, we have a 13-point scorecard, and we do, and it's incredibly helpful in our conversations with treetops, with presidents, chancellors, provosts, and administrators, how easy it would be to put in these methods in place to help young people be able to vote. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just lower barriers. You have to incentivize why I even want to vote. And that's what we are, I think, unique in doing. And so funding issues and funding lowering barriers, driving demand and increasing supply is the way to success. And I hope very much that you will continue to support us for at least over 2 years, so that we can actually enjoy a democracy that is not as under attack as it is today. Thank you all very much for your time. We are so excited. A lot of data. We're going to share our annual report, a whole new description that tries to make it digestible for your conversations with your network, because we need you to help anchor our work wherever you are, both in terms of changing the national dialogue about that discounts young voters, and also increasing donor engagement in supporting youth civic engagement. Thank you and have a wonderful week, and let's make this year successful for young voters.